Presentation on the Salina Campus Needs Assessment today, and we will get started with Rick Wise with Clark and Anderson.
So, Mr. Chairman, I am not Rick Wise, but I did just want to kind of set this up a little bit. We did provide members a copy of the Salina Campus Needs Assessment, a printed copy of that. You will also see the testimony from the Clark and Anderson Design, who compiled that study for us, and you'll see the agency's testimony there as well. And we do have one of the lead authors of that study that's here today, and there will be another one online that's also available to brief for a component. And if it's all right with the chairman, I'd like to just come up towards the end and kind of wrap up what the agency's position might be.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Rick Wise with Clark and Anderson. Is Jonathan on the line? Okay, so he'll. So happy to be here this afternoon to talk to you about the study that we just recently completed. Here's the outline of what we're going to go through, the topics that we're going to walk through. Start with the study team. So our team is comprised of our individuals from Clark and Anderson, architects, landscape architects, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, who completed, and the landscape architect who completed this study. In addition, Jonathan Tallman with Dewberry, public safety expert we teamed with, is also on the call today, and he'll be presenting part of this. In addition to our team, we worked with stakeholders from the Kansas Highway Patrol, as well as facilities and property management. And then we also met with individuals representing the different troops who are a part of the facilities in Salina. So the study began in September. This is an overview of the elements of the study. We started early September, had a kickoff meeting, generally to talk about the goals and objectives for the project. We had another series of meetings in Salina on the 16th and 17th with Jonathan Tallman, we'll talk about here in a second, really to determine the types of spaces, the number of spaces, the program for the long-term needs of Kansas Highway Patrol in Salina. In October, we came back to Salina and did a full assessment of all the existing facilities, walked through each of the buildings with our engineers to determine their general condition, suitability for long-term use. We completed an initial draft document in November that was submitted to the agency for review and comment, and then we completed the effort by the end of the year with a final document, and I believe you all have a copy. And then obviously today we're presenting to committees regarding the outcomes of the study. So that's an overview of the project. If you have questions, please ask along the way. We want this to be interactive process. Jonathan Tallman is going to talk about the programming effort that we went through.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Tallman with Dewberry. So we started our process of really getting to an understanding of the Kansas Highway Patrol, the training facilities, and Group C and M and S. That process consisted of staff interviews, touring all existing facilities at the Marymount campus and the 3 other locations within Salina, and documenting those existing conditions and then recording those measurements into a final report. Next slide. We, of course, met with staff of Troop J, M, N, and C, as mentioned before, walking through those existing facilities, see how the spaces were used. Just in general, how did the workflow work for each of the troops? What works, what does not work? Having a good understanding and creating a good understanding of the Kansas Highway Patrol workflow within each of the troops. Next slide. And through those conversations and that analysis really revealed significant lack of space throughout all the facilities. We also encountered many issues of safety for staff at that facility, along with logistical issues between the 4 different locations for training within Salina, and not just safety at the buildings, but safety overall from a site, overall site logistics as well on the Marymount campus. Some of those identified space needs were like classroom spaces. There's currently not enough classrooms for the Kansas Highway Patrol to host all of the trainings that they would like to, and are needed for in-service and new recruits. The technology systems all need to be updated. Everything is pretty dated there, but they are able to get by with what they have today. Dormitories just need to be modernized in general. They do not meet current ADA requirements. They have demographic challenges within the dormitories. The restrooms in particular have many issues, enough so that we would recommend tearing that building down and rebuilding it. The driving course has issues as well. It needs some updating. The biggest issue there was allow for driving at increased speeds and getting that training for officers. And then the demand for parking on that site, it varies greatly, but for graduation and training days, parking can be a big issue because of the nature of the Marymount campus. And on graduation days, you might have to use buses to bus people from the lower parking lot up to the building where the graduations are taking place, just because the site is not, you can't walk it if you are a disabled person, or use a wheelchair if you're a disabled person to get to the top of the hill. Next slide. We also noticed that a lot of the spaces aren't being utilized in the way that they were originally intended. A lot of the storage rooms used to be dormitory spaces on the Marymount campus, and the spaces are not optimally organized within the buildings. Dispatch center is not designed to withstand a storm. So if a major storm came and hit that building, the people within it would not be able to continue to operate. They actually have to go to the basement for shelter in an emergency, so they can't stay at their desks working like they should be able to. The entire process ultimately showed there is a need for increased program. If you go to the next slide, please. And that program is for the next 25 years. Operational efficiencies we talked about for a second, but just you can see here graphically from the main campus, there's 3 other sites that the troopers need to go to in order to get those the required training and locations that they need. So that does equate to less time in training and less educational hours for troopers and recruits. Next slide. And then the detailed program, it's a room by room summary stating the space that is needed, how big the room needs to be, along with notes on the right-hand column, really defining like what those technological needs are or equipment needs are for those spaces, and give a general description of that need and why. Next slide. So today on the Marymount campus and the 3 other locations, there's exist 188,000 square feet. The program developed by our team projects a need of 375,000 square feet. The existing land across all the campus locations is 60 acres. Marymount campus is right around 26 acres, if I remember correctly, and the projected 25-year need to bring everything into one location would be 187 acres.
Thanks, Jonathan. So that's essentially the program that was developed looking at that 25-year need for the Kansas Highway Patrol in Salina. We also went through a facilities assessment. We walked through each of the buildings to determine their general condition suitability for long-term use. Some of the general findings, number one, lack of security. Right now, as you approach the Marymount College campus, there's no separation from the public, so an individual can drive right up to a building. A facility like this should have better security separation. The campus, the Marymount College campus is on a hill, creating challenges with accessibility. The buildings themselves have been updated over the years to accommodate some accessibility needs, but there still continues to be some accessibility challenges within them, as well as the accessibility challenges to go between buildings is quite a challenge. You can see in the picture in the upper right, that is how they bring in supplies into the lower level. We also determined mechanically, electrically, the systems, while they've been well maintained over the years by the Highway Patrol, are again aging out, needing a replacement, and will continue to be an ongoing cost if they're to be maintained. The facilities generally aren't sized appropriately. Again, the Marymount College campus was retrofitted for the Highway Patrol. And as Jonathan pointed out in the programming effort, the space need for the Highway Patrol practically needs to double to meet the 25-year need from where they are today. And then lastly, on this slide, the dispatch center. High priority for the Highway Patrol. It's undersized for its current need and long-term need, and it's also not in a hardened space, so it is susceptible to, if a large storm event was to go through, it would take down the Highway Patrol's dispatch facilities. We went through a scoring analysis for each of the buildings, and you can see the criteria on the right. All the elements we looked at, architecturally, mechanically, electrically, structurally. And then the scoring ranged from 1 being major renovation or replacement, all the way to 4 being excellent. And then we developed a composite score for each building. As we went through that analysis, you can see all the buildings on the right. Only 1 building scored 3 or above, being inadequate to excellent condition. That is the Central Evidence Facility. It is a building that's only a couple years old, so we would think that it would be in great condition. The next layer down, buildings needing minor renovation, scoring to that 2 to 3 range. The driving course building scoring 2.2, just barely above that 2 threshold. And then the remaining buildings, all the rest of the buildings, scored less than 2, meaning needing major renovation and or replacement. So with all that data, we wanted to look at options, ideas for what Kansas Highway Patrol could do moving forward to accommodate meeting both their long-term needs, whether it's on the current locations or a new site. So again, based on the existing conditions, 188,000 square feet, 4 sites spread across Salina, as you can see in the diagram to the right. Those buildings currently occupy about 60,000 or 60 acres of space in those 4 different locations. And as Jonathan noted, to meet the 25-year need for the Highway Patrol, needs the program, the amount of square footage needs to practically double, 375,000 square feet, and then site area needing between 60 and 187 acres, and we'll talk through that in a second on why there's a difference. So planning option 1. Option 1 says that you move everything. You vacate the current Marymount College campus. You vacate the current space they occupy at Kansas Department of Transportation, vacate space that they occupy at Kansas Highway Commission where the shooting range is, and then you vacate a current lease at the Salina Airport where Troop S is. All in, $443.6 million for that project, but it does accommodate the long-term needs of the Highway Patrol. Some advantages and disadvantages of this option, you can see in the column to the right. This consolidates all programs onto one campus. So it creates a lot of efficiencies, operational efficiency, to be co-located together versus having to travel across town. It also vacates leased space, and it allows for the potential sale of the Marymount College campus. The con on this one is obviously the highest first cost. Here's a diagram, just a pictorial diagram of what a new campus, everything together on one site might look like. Obviously, this would be greatly dependent upon the site that is chosen, but everything shown here would be on one site. Option 2, a little bit smaller, the partial reconfiguration on a new campus, $416.6 million. Again, with this option, you're selling, or you have the potential to sell the Marymount College campus. However, you would maintain space, or they would maintain space, at the KDOT location for central evidence, maintain space at the Kansas Highway Commission for the outdoor firearms range, and then you would vacate, or they would vacate the lease at the Salina Airport Authority. Again, you can see this is proposing mostly new facilities on the new campus. The only difference being the outdoor firearms range and central evidence would stay in their current locations. Pros with this one, it consolidates most of the programs in one location. It creates improved efficiency by getting most of their facilities in the same location or close to each other. It does vacate some existing lease space, and it again allows for the sale of the Marymount College campus. Cons, operational inefficiency with not all the facilities being together. And again, you can see that it maintains firearms range and central evidence in their current locations. Again, similar diagram to what was shown in option 1. The only difference is here, it does not include central evidence, and it does not include the firearms range. Option 3 takes a little bit different tact. Option 3 looks at a total gross floor area requirement across all buildings at 346,000 square feet, 60 acres of space needed at a cost of $327.2 million. Again, you maintain all the existing facilities except for the Salina Airport Authority lease. Again, on this one, pros being new construction for all of the programs on the Marymount College campus, and we'll show that here in a second. It vacates the lease for Salina Airport Authority. It requires no additional land acquisition, and it is a lower first cost than the first two options. Cons being operational, you still have the operational inefficiency associated with being spread out in numerous locations. So this is pictorially what it might look like. This is the Marymount College campus. It would propose relocating all of facilities to the west half of that current campus. Would require the demolition of the existing buildings to then build back additional parking and then some additional buildings. So we believe that everything can fit on this campus. And by getting to essentially one level, we can reduce any of those accessibility issues. And then we would also propose fencing the facility to provide better security. Option 4 is essentially just fixing what you have, fixing the facilities, but not expanding them. We wanted to provide a wide range of options. This one says you just want to modernize what you have today. So 188,000 square feet, that's what you have today. That's what we're proposing at a cost of $116.4 million. The only space you're vacating is this Salina Airport Authority, Troop S. It would relocate to this campus. Downside, or the pros to this one, it is lowest first cost. It vacates and it vacates the lease space for the Salina Airport Authority. The major con here is it doesn't meet the 25-year need. It just sort of fixes the facilities, but over the course of the next 25 years, the Kansas Highway Patrol will outgrow those facilities. And then this is just a diagram looking at the existing facilities as they sit today on that campus. So in summary, 4 different options to consider. The first 3 meet the long-term needs of the Highway Patrol. Option 4 does not. So we also were asked to look at different sites for where a new campus could be. We investigated 8 different sites in and around Salina. And I've added, you can see in the diagram where the current firearms range is, where Marymount College campus is, and where central evidence is in relation to these 8 different sites. We went through an analysis of each of the sites and objectively looked at different criteria, both in site characteristics and accessibility and adjacencies. And then we weighted each of those and then went through a scoring effort associated with each of these categories for each of the sites. The outcome was that if you look at the scoring matrix, 3 sites sort of rose to the top. KSU Salina, the Kansas National Guard, and the Waterwell site. So sites A, B, and D were the top 3 scoring sites. This is these are images of what those 3 sites look like. And as you can tell, they all range in size. Site D is the only one large enough by itself to accommodate the full program that we looked at. Sites A and B does not include specifically the driving course. So the driving course would have to be on an alternate location. So what is our recommendation? Of the 4 different options, our team felt that option 2 made the most sense. It consolidates most of the programs into one location. Central evidence, again, we felt is in a good location within Salina, and the building is in great condition, so it did not make sense to relocate it. The outdoor firing range, again, is accessible to the troopers who are utilizing it for training, and while it would be convenient to have it as part of the campus, I think the Highway Patrol feels that they can live with it being at an alternate location. So with planning option 2, it does address the 25-year growth need for the Highway Patrol. It consolidates most of the elements into one location. It maintains, again, as I noted, the outdoor firearms range and central evidence in their current locations. It does require purchase of new property or acquisition of new property in Salina to accommodate this. It does allow for the sale of the Marymount College campus. So of the 3 sites that we are considering, the top 3, site D, obviously the Waterwell site, can accommodate everything. And this just shows diagrammatically how that might work on that property. Site B, the Kansas National Guard, can accommodate most of the program elements. The only thing this really does not accommodate for option 2 is the driver's course. So it would require a separate site be acquired for the addition of the driver's course. Everything else can fit on this property. Similarly, the KSU Salina site, again, can accommodate all of those functions, and you can see all the buildings and parking and all the elements fitting on that property in the diagram. Again, but the driver's course would need to be separate. So at least for the KSU Salina option, we did determine that there is land area. This is private property, but there is land area directly adjacent to the north to see how a driver's course might fit onto that property. So it is the area highlighted in red in this image. So with, we'll go back to site option D, the one that can accommodate everything, although all 3 could be considered. Working with the Highway Patrol, we determined that there were different priority levels, so we essentially developed a 4-phase approach. The highest priority element for the Highway Patrol is the dispatch center replacement. $24.9 million. Phase 2, or the next highest priority, relocating Troop C headquarters and Troop S, is another $26.8 million. And then the training academy, $258.5 million. And lastly, the driving course, all totaling the $416.6 million that we talked about previously. So that is the summary of what we determined. I will open it up to any questions you might have.
Thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question. Looking at option number 3, I see that it says here to meet the 25-year needs assessment, 187 acres is about needed. Does option 3 meet that requirement just because you're able to build up and that meets the square footage by building office space?
So the main difference between option 2 and 3, well, obviously on option 3, we're maintaining everything at the Marymount College campus. It does not obviously accommodate the driver's course. So one of the big challenges with option 3 is that it would require significant phasing, because obviously the Highway Patrol occupies that campus today. To get it to essentially one level, there'd be a lot of excavation that would occur on that site, and the addition of retaining walls. So we propose that all of the functions would move to the west, and it would be phased over multiple years to build on that site. It'd be challenging, but we think it's possible.
Representative Bloom.
There is, yeah, this is a good image to look at. So there is a drainage area that goes through the center of that site.
Problem or not?
It would be a challenge, but we don't think it's a challenge that we could not accommodate through the addition of bridges across that drainage area for the driving course.
You know, it's nice to have you in Salina, not everything in Topeka. And you're planning on staying in Salina for sure?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further questions for Rick? Representative Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. On option 1, and I think option 2, for reconfiguring a new campus, I'm specifically looking at the driving range.
Yes.
On 62 of the big book, is that the current driving range?
Yeah, so currently, the Highway Patrol is utilizing space on KDOT property for the driving course. That is a 1-mile course. The long-term plan for Highway Patrol to address their long-term training needs is to have a 3-mile course. And there's not sufficient land in that KDOT property to accommodate a 3-mile course. So it's about a third of the length they need.
I understand that because it looks a lot bigger.
Yes.
So my next question is the option 1, is that all in one? I mean, is that, the way it looks, that's going to be everything, correct? In basically one area?
The difference between option 1 and option 2. Option 1 is all program elements on one campus. Option 2 is that central evidence would not need to be a part of this new campus. The other element is the outdoor firearms range. Option 2 does not relocate the outdoor firearms range. So that is a big difference between 1 and 2, is central evidence and the outdoor firearms range.
Okay. So, and going back to the driving range, you said the current course is just over a mile?
I think it's just under a mile.
Under a mile? And the new one would be about 3 miles?
3 miles.
Okay. How did you get from 1 mile to 3 miles? I mean, what are the driving conditions that troopers engage in on a daily basis different when they had this as to now, or is there some other factor being involved in that?
Yeah, there's different elements for a driver's course. One of the big challenges that troopers have today at the current course is there's not enough length of straightaway to accommodate the speeds that troopers will experience on the highways in a pursuit. So having a longer course provides the ability to have that training that they need to be prepared for those types of pursuits. So.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just expound a little bit where you've got the phase 1 through 1, 2, 3, 4 of how that can be spread over several years, where we don't need this big lump sum of 400 and some million in the budget 1 year, but rather can phase it in?
Sure. So again, we tried to work with Highway Patrol to determine the priority levels of all the different elements. The dispatch center is their highest need, and I think Merle will talk about that here in a second. That has to happen because their current dispatch center is both undersized as well as not built to sustain a storm event like it should. So that is the highest priority. Troop C headquarters is also in need of being relocated or being a new facility. So those are the two highest priority elements. We tried to develop the cost matrix here so that it could be phased in over time. We knew that the $416 million price tag was more than may be available. So we really tried to focus on the highest priority. So that's why we developed this phasing approach.
Along with that project, say if we did the option B or whatever you want to call it there, is it a definite we buy it, or is there a lease to build option anybody's looked at with a buyout type thing?
Yeah, so these options and these amounts included in these estimates would be purchasing the property and constructing those facilities. So none of these account for a lease to build scenario. These were options meant to just give some basic estimates about what would be involved in those. So no, they do not include a lease to build scenario.
Any further questions? Representative Bloom.
Do you have any idea what Marymount's worth if you sold it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So, Representative, Kansas statute requires that when selling or acquiring property, there's a process that has to go through that includes conducting 3 appraisals. And we have not taken that step yet, but we can tell you that when the property was purchased in 1994, it was purchased at about $5 million. A general kind of look across some websites would indicate a value potentially of $8 million at this point, but that's a very basic search. It's possible that Marymount property could be of more significant value than that.
Well, I know they put apartments in some of the, I don't know, classrooms or what, and people like them. I mean, they're a big deal in Salina. They like to get into these apartments, but I have no idea what your buildings are like.
That's correct. That Marymount site sits on the east side of town in a residential neighborhood. I would argue potentially an affluent residential neighborhood with a country club next to it. And one building from the former Marymount campus, when it was dissolved in the 1990s, most of them went to the Highway Patrol. One of those buildings was sold to a private owner. That became a condominium that is used for, it's a condominium. It's used for condominium, and that's part of the challenge is because that parking lot and access to that condominium requires individuals to travel through our law enforcement center. But yes, it sets on a beautiful area in Salina.
It's a good part of town.
Any further questions? All right, thank you very much. Merle?
Thank Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am going to be speaking from kind of a cover letter that we had included on there that should be titled Agency Recommendation Concerning the Salina Campus Needs Assessment. I am Merle Riedel. I'm Executive Officer for the Highway Patrol. Just a little reminder of why we are here today. On January 29th, the Joint Committee on State Building Construction requested this presentation on the Salina Campus Needs Assessment, and they recommended that the agency continue to work with the legislature to satisfy the Salina campus needs. This committee made a similar recommendation when they heard our budget, and we look forward to the discussion of how to meet the needs identified in this assessment while positioning KHP for assets for the next 25 years and beyond. This is a significant event for the Highway Patrol. Our assets in Salina really comprise the heart of our law enforcement operations throughout Kansas. This is our training academy, but it is more than just our training academy. It includes a Troop C headquarters, a Troop S headquarters, central supply, and many elements that are central to what the Highway Patrol does. In our testimony today, we just want to clarify how we came to this point, discuss some of the options that were presented as part of that assessment, and review funding requests to support those options. To be clear, the agency is not requesting to vacate the city of Salina, but rather we are proposing to reconfigure how our assets are arrayed in the city. The city of Salina is located at the confluence of two major thoroughfares, which affords troopers ready access to the interstates and highway system. Further, the city's central location within the state minimizes travel distance necessary for troopers from across the state to attend annual training, secure evidence, and receive supplies. So just as a background, this assessment was prepared pursuant to House Bill 2551, which was passed during the 2024 legislature. It directed the agency to conduct a comprehensive assessment concerning the reconfiguration of KHP assets in Salina, including a training center, dispatch center, and Troop C headquarters. Looking at the report recommendation, as Mr. Wise noted, the report analyzed 4 planning options and recommended planning option 2, partial reconfiguration of KHP assets on a new campus, which is estimated at a cost of $416.6 million. The agency concurs with that recommendation, but we acknowledge that amount is likely insurmountable in any one given year. So as an alternative, we're requesting up to 51.7 million SGF for the initial steps in that reconfiguration. So just some background on why this proviso language was included and what our assets look like. KHP has a heavy presence in Salina. That includes a training academy, dispatch center, central supply, Troop C headquarters. Those are all in buildings on the former Marymount campus in East Salina. That campus was constructed from 1922 to 1972 and occupied by the Highway Patrol in 1974. The training academy is the sole source for training new state troopers through 24-week residency courses that occur multiple times throughout the year. Further, the academy supports annual in-service training for all troopers, dispatcher training, and is available to other state and public safety entities. That dispatch center is a 24-hour operation facility that provides dispatching services for troopers statewide. That includes directing all ground and air assets. That's a highly technical communications center, and it's currently housed on the first floor of a former dormitory, a space that was not constructed to support that kind of technology. Also, Troop C is located on that Marymount campus. Troop C provides traffic and highway law enforcement among an 18-county region in north central Kansas. So other KHP assets in Salina include the current 1-mile driving course, a central evidence facility, and those are both on KDOT property in South Salina, Troop S facility on the Salina Airport, and a firearms range in West Salina. So you can see from that graphic that we are spread among 4 different parts of the city. So how did we get to this point? During the 2024 legislative session, the governor recommended $10 million to construct and equip a new dispatch center on KDOT property in South Salina. The legislature amended the governor's recommendation to provide a total of $20 million for a new dispatch center, a firing range, and to purchase 200 acres in Salina for growth on a new consolidated campus. So this was a proviso that the legislature approved last year. The governor vetoed that item, largely because probably many of the proposed amounts were difficult to substantiate at that time, and the governor suggested a comprehensive assessment of KHP assets in Salina be conducted. The legislature concurred, and that proviso was added, and that is the study that you see before you today. And Mr. Wise reviewed some of those findings, but I do just want to note some of those. A building by building assessment scored 7 of 9 structures in need of major renovation and replacement. Structures such as those housing the dispatch center lack suitable hardening and redundant systems to maintain operations in the event of a disaster. Some buildings on the Marymount campus are over 100 years old, and future use would require renovation to extend their useful life. Security and safety challenges on the Marymount College campus are of particular concern for law enforcement agencies. There is no perimeter security. There's no access control onto the grounds. Traffic on the campus is mixed with those public that are accessing their residents and condominiums on the edge of the grounds. And Mr. Wise reviewed several different planning options. Just as a reminder, options 1 and options 2 involve full or partial reconfiguration on a new campus. So that is moving off Marymount, moving to another site. Options 1 and options 2 also include constructing a new 3-mile driving course. That's a significant component to that. Options 3 and 4 involved reconstruction or modernization on the Marymount site. So site selection, the report analyzed 8 sites in Salina and Saline County as potential locations and recommended that 3 of those sites be pursued. And that was Kansas State University with 27 acres of available state property, Kansas National Guard 16 acres of available state property, or the Waterwell Road site, which is 211 acres of private property. So the agency concurs, and looking on page 3 of your document, agency request, the agency concurs with the report's recommendation and requests up to 51.7 million SGF for the initial steps in reconfiguration. The funding would support relocating the following operational law enforcement assets, which are considered a priority. So that would relocate the dispatch center at 24.9 million and Troop C headquarters and Troop S and the Troop S facilities at 26.8 million. So that would largely leave the training academy. That would leave the academic components. So the training academy, the driving course that is used to support the training academy, central supply, that would leave those as remaining projects, and we would pursue funding for those in subsequent years. Some justification, the agency requests funding in alignment with option 2 for the following reasons. Option 2 begins to meet the agency's long-term needs, such as a suitable and safe dispatch center, while acknowledging constraints to state resources. Option 2 addresses security and force protection concerns unique to public safety facilities. Option 2 begins relocation off the former Marymount campus, which is projected to incur annual maintenance costs of $750,000 in coming years. The recommended sites place all KHP assets in closer proximity to major highways and thoroughfares, which decreases response time for troopers. Really, the central challenge with that Marymount site is located on the wrong side of town. The Marymount site is located on the east side of town, while the airport, K-State Salina, KDOT, Kansas National Guard, all those state agencies and public safety elements are on the other side of town in West Salina. In East Salina, that Marymount sits in a residential neighborhood. When troopers respond, they have to travel through residential streets in order to get to the highway system. If they were on the west side, they'd be at near almost immediate access to I-135. So moving forward, should the request be approved, the agency proposes the following. We would conduct formal discussions with KSU Salina, Kansas National Guard, or KDOT concerning land use and shared resources. So there is some potential, if we were to co-locate on some of those state property grounds, we might be able to have some cost savings related to utilities, maintenance, and parking, which might reduce project costs. We would also gather appraisals for sale of the Marymount College campus, which stands to offset some of these costs. And we would examine non-construction costs to determine aspects that may be suitable for grant funding. So there may be elements of this project that may be suitable to seek either federal funding or even congressionally directed funding. It's unlikely any of that funding would ever support the project in its entirety. More likely it would support components of the project. So an example might be a dispatcher's workstation that has communication devices. It might be that a federal grant can support purchase and installation of those communication devices in a new facility. So just one thing I wanted to mention, there was a discussion of what is the difference between option 2 and option 3. Option 2 at 416 million and one moment. $327. So the largest difference, there's two aspects that make the difference there. One aspect is option 3 involves building nearly all aspects on a new site. It also accounts for construction of a 3-mile driving course. That's option 2. Under option 3, we would be building within the existing site of Marymount, which means we would not be constructing a 3-mile driving course. A 3-mile driving course is estimated at $106.4 million. So even if you were to take option, not to confuse this more, but if you were to take option 2, you could, if you were to cut out a driving course from that scenario, you would be able to subtract $106.4 million from that total, from that amount estimated. So we are approaching this trying to accommodate the most highest priority aspects first, which are the dispatch center and those troop headquarters. Even among those, we would say that the dispatch center is above all the highest priority. The current working conditions for that are very difficult. The facility does not accommodate all the equipment, even the power regulation capabilities within that facility can have some of that sensitive material in jeopardy at times. It's not severe weather hardened. It's not a good working environment for our employees on that site. So that is a very quick run through of the agency's response, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Merle. So at the 416 million and the agency request is 51.7. I know you said moving forward you'll talk to K-State and other state agencies and maybe try to find some federal funding. It may be too early to give a good answer here, but are you looking at around 50 million a year? Is this going to be an 8-year project? We don't know what the out years look like for the budget, so if we got 150 million in and paused, just kind of tell us what it looks like down the road.
Yeah, so we are requesting 51.7 million for FY 2026 for the dispatch center and the troop headquarters. It's likely we would request funding for the training academy and central supply in FY 2028, so that would be 258.5 million. And then 2 years after that, we would likely request funding for the driving course, and that's 106.4 million. So in essence, every 2 years, we would likely be requesting funding for the next phase. That would allow us sufficient time to largely execute projects and sort of spread the cost over a period of years. And even of those, I think the agency would determine that the driving course is of the least priority. So that item that's 106.4 million, in the end, it may be possible that we can accomplish most of what we need and continue to utilize the existing driving course.
Any further questions for Merle, Representative Bloom?
Right, so option 2, what we're proposing is to continue discussions with 3 of those sites. Our preference in this scenario is to build on existing state property. You'll see that Waterwell Road, which is the large piece of property that in a perfect world could hold everything right now. The challenge with that is private property, so that's a little more difficult. There's a process in which to acquire private property, and we've even become aware recently that portions of that have already been segregated for use for the construction of a convenience store that's going in on that site. So our preference is state property, and that state property, as I mentioned, would be K-State Salina, the Kansas National Guard, and there is a KDOT sub-area office. These are all located on the west side of town in proximity to the Salina Airport. In fact, the Kansas National Guard site actually abuts up to the airport, and so does K-State Salina. Both of those have some available space that we think could accommodate the majority of our facilities. Yep, it's our determination that, or the assessment actually indicates that they have enough space for all of our needs except the driving course. The driving course is the complicated part of this because it requires a lot of land area. It's unlikely any state property in Salina is going to be available for that. So that if we pursue that driving course, that will likely have to be acquiring private property. All the other items, we think, and the report indicates, those could be constructed on one of or a combination of those 3 state properties.
Any further questions? Representative Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your detailed presentation. 2 questions. Where exactly is the existing driving course right now?
Yeah, so I would refer you to the PowerPoint slideshow that you looked at.
Well, I mean, just generally, it's not over by the KHP headquarters and training facility.
It's not. If you looked at this image here, you'd see Site D, Waterwell Road.
So it's on the west side.
The existing 1-mile driving course is on the west side, yes.
Okay. So they could conceivably use that driving course while they build on the existing state-owned property also in that general vicinity. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. That's what I want to know. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Representative Bloom.
I know you're having trouble getting recruits. How many do you lose when they come to what you have now and they don't want your facilities? I mean, are you losing any? Or?
That's difficult to determine an
Does it
exact
make any
number that might be
does it make any
associated with
difference?
that. We can tell you that, I can tell you that numbers indicate the training academy facility is used or was used frequently by other agencies and other agencies in public safety. They could use the auditorium and classroom for training of their types. The volume of requests that we have had to use that has gone down over the years. Part of that is, I think at one time it was appealing, there's a dormitory there because our troopers, it's a residency course. That dormitory can also be used for other public safety entities if they were to do multi-day training there. And I think that was used heavily years ago because of the building's conditions, because of the access problems onto the campus, limited access for individuals with mobility issues. The frequency at which outside entities have used that training academy has gone down over the years.
How many are you going to be short highway patrolmen over the next few years? You're short now, aren't you?
So we do have some vacancies within our trooper positions, and I'd have to look to see what the actual projection is on shortage of those positions, but we have individuals that are going through that training program currently.
Any further questions? All right, if there's no questions, thank you very much, Merle. All right, and in closing, like I said, I don't know if we will have another meeting, but just wanted to say thank you to Vice Chair Howell and Ranking Member Hoy. You guys were great to work with this year, and then Kyle with the research team, Chris with the revisors, and our new committee assistant, Garrett. Just wanted to give thanks to all you guys and the full committee. All right, well, it